Long ago, when America was still young, a restless boy from Baltimore left home at just 12 to chase the call of the sea. By 16, he was already fighting in the Revolutionary War, captured, escaping, and commanding ships with fearless courage. His name was Joshua Barney. He rose from a cabin boy to a national hero, defeating stronger enemies against impossible odds. But his greatest test came years later, in 1814, when the British marched on Washington. While others fled, Barney and his men stood their ground in one of the bravest last stands in American history. This is the forgotten story of Joshua Barney, the sailor, the fighter, the patriot. Early life and childhood dreams. Long ago, when the United States of America was still young, a boy was born in Maryland who would grow up to become one of the bravest naval heroes of his nation. His name was Joshua Barney. Today, his story is rarely told. But in his own time, he was a sailor, a fighter, a leader, and a man of unshakable courage. Joshua Barney was born on July 6, 1759, in Baltimore, Maryland. His family was not wealthy, but they raised him with discipline and faith. From a very young age, Joshua showed a restless spirit. He did not dream of farms, trade, or a quiet life. Instead, his heart was drawn to the sea. By the age of 12, Joshua had already chosen his path. He signed up as a cabin boy on a merchant ship. Life was tough for a boy so young, but he loved the challenges of storms, long hours, and the freedom of the ocean. A young patriot in the Revolutionary War. In 1775, when Joshua was just 16, the Revolutionary War began. America was fighting for independence from Great Britain, and the seas became a battlefield. Joshua joined the Continental Navy as a midshipman, proving himself fearless despite his youth. Serving on the ship Hornet, he quickly learned navigation, cannon fire, and leadership. He fought bravely in several battles and gained a reputation for courage beyond his years. At 17, he was captured by the British. Life in a prison ship was cruel and dangerous, but Barney refused to lose hope. With bold determination, he managed to escape, just the first of many times he would defy captivity. Rising through the ranks. From 1779 to 1782, Joshua served on ships like the Saratoga and the Virginia, steadily rising in responsibility. By his early 20s, he was already acting as a commander. He inspired his men by leading from the front, never asking them to do what he would not do himself. In 1780, he was given command of a small vessel called the Hyder Ally. Though modest compared to British warships, Barney turned it into a weapon of victory. The famous Battle of Hyder Ally versus General Monk. On April 1782, the Hyder Ally faced the larger and stronger British ship, General Monk. The odds were against Barney, but he attacked with boldness. The battle was fierce, cannons roared, smoke filled the air, and men fought hand to hand. Through brilliant tactics, Barney outmaneuvered the enemy and captured the General Monk. This victory shocked everyone. Newspapers praised him, Congress honored him, and America hailed him as a national hero. After the Revolution. When the Revolutionary War ended in 1783, Barney briefly served in the French Navy and later returned to America. He married, had children, and tried to settle into peace, though his heart always longed for the sea. He became a successful privateer, attacking enemy merchant ships with government approval. His skill and daring brought him wealth and respect. The War of 1812. Return to battle. In 1812, war returned between America and Britain. By now, Barney was over 50, but his spirit was unbroken. He offered his service once again and was placed in command of the Chesapeake Bay Flotilla, a fleet of small gunboats designed to fight in rivers and shallow waters. The British Navy was powerful, but their massive ships struggled in narrow bays. Barney's flotilla harassed them with quick strikes, delaying their progress and buying time for American defenses. Defending the capital. By 1814, the British turned their eyes toward Washington, D.C. The city was small and poorly defended, and if captured, America would suffer a humiliating blow. Barney and his flotilla fought bravely, blocking, delaying, and frustrating the British advance. Though older and weary, his leadership inspired his men. He reminded them that they were fighting not just for a city, but for the survival of the United States. And so, in the summer of 1814, Joshua Barney marched toward the battlefield that would define his legacy, the road to Washington, D.C. By the summer of 1814, the War of 1812 had entered a dangerous new phase. Napoleon had been defeated in Europe, and now Britain could turn its full military power against the young United States. Experienced British soldiers, fresh from years of war, were sent across the Atlantic. Their new plan was bold: strike directly at the American capital, Washington, D.C. For Joshua Barney, this was the challenge of a lifetime. He was no longer a young midshipman, but a seasoned commander, over 50 years old, with grey hair and years of hardship behind him. Yet his courage and determination had not faded. If anything, they had grown stronger. He knew the defense of Washington was more than just a battle for a city. It was a fight for the nation's honor and survival. The Chesapeake Bay Flotilla Barney had been placed in charge of the Chesapeake Bay Flotilla, a collection of small gunboats armed with cannons. They were no match for the massive British warships that patrolled the coast, but they had one great advantage: speed and maneuverability in shallow waters. For months, Barney's flotilla harassed the British. They would strike suddenly, fire their guns, and disappear into narrow rivers where the enemy's large ships could not follow. These running battles frustrated the British and made them cautious. But Barney understood the limits of his force. His small boats could not stop the British fleet from advancing inland. Eventually, under overwhelming pressure, he was forced to scuttle, or destroy, his own flotilla to prevent it from falling into enemy hands. Though it was painful to burn his ships, Barney's decision preserved his men for the greater battle that was coming, preparing for the Battle of Bladensburg. As the British marched toward Washington in August 1814, American forces scrambled to organize a defense. Unfortunately, the American army was poorly prepared. Many soldiers were untrained militia, nervous and untested in real combat. The leadership was divided, and the nation was caught off guard. Amid this confusion, Joshua Barney and his flotilla men stood out. These were seasoned fighters, sailors who had lived through storms, sea battles, and hardship. They trusted their commander, and he trusted them. When ordered to join the defense of Washington, Barney led his men with pride. The chosen battleground was Bladensburg, Maryland, a small town about 6 miles from the capital. It was here on August 24, 1814, that the fate of Washington would be decided. The Battle of Bladensburg begins. The morning of the battle was hot, so hot that many soldiers fainted from exhaustion before the fighting even started. The American troops were spread across the battlefield in a poor defensive line. President James Madison, Secretary of State James Monroe, and other officials were present, watching nervously. When the British Army, led by Major General Robert Ross, arrived, they advanced with discipline and confidence. These were veterans of Europe's brutal wars, and they were not intimidated by the inexperienced American militia. As the British soldiers moved forward, many American units broke ranks and fled almost immediately. Panic spread, and what should have been a strong defense turned into chaos. Joshua Barney holds the line. In the middle of this disaster, Joshua Barney and his flotillamen stood firm. His men dragged their cannons into position on a ridge and opened fire with deadly accuracy. British soldiers were cut down by the blasts, and for a time, Barney's small force stopped the entire British advance. Eyewitnesses described the scene. Barney, tall and commanding despite his age, gave clear orders under fire. His sailors, sweating in the heat, loaded and fired their guns with precision. Every shot shook the field, forcing the British to slow their attack. Unlike the fleeing militia, Barney's men refused to retreat. They fought like lions, determined to protect their country's capital. Wounded, but unbroken. But bravery alone could not hold back the tide. The British outnumbered the Americans, and their discipline eventually overwhelmed the defenders. During the battle, Joshua Barney was struck in the thigh by a musket ball. The wound was severe, and his horse was killed beneath him. Even as he fell, Barney refused to abandon his men. Propped against a cannon, bleeding heavily, he urged his sailors to keep fighting. They obeyed, holding the line until they were surrounded and had no choice but to surrender. British officers, impressed by Barney's courage, treated him with unusual respect. General Ross himself praised the American commander, saying that if more of the American army had fought like Barney and his men, the battle might have ended differently. The burning of Washington. After defeating the American defenders at Bladensburg, the British marched unopposed into Washington, D.C. That night, they set fire to the Capitol, the White House, and other public buildings. The flames lit up the night sky, and smoke hung over the city for days. It was one of the darkest moments in American history. Yet amid the humiliation, Joshua Barney's bravery stood out as a beacon of honor. Newspapers across the nation reported how he and his men had fought when so many others had fled. His stand at Bladensburg became a symbol of resistance in a time of despair. A hero's final years. Barney never fully recovered from his wound. Though he survived the battle, the injury left him weakened. He returned to his family in Maryland, where he lived quietly in his final years. But even in retirement, he remained respected and admired. Friends and neighbors sought his advice, and young sailors looked up to him as a model of courage and duty. He carried with him the scars of war, both physical and emotional, but also the pride of a man who had given everything for his country. On December 1st, 1818, Joshua Barney passed away at the age of 59. He was laid to rest with honor, remembered by those who knew him as a true American patriot. Legacy of Joshua Barney. Today, Joshua Barney's name is not widely remembered. He does not appear often in textbooks, and his story is rarely told. Yet his life embodies the spirit of America's earliest generations. Courage in the face of overwhelming odds, loyalty to country, and a refusal to surrender. He was captured by the enemy multiple times, but he always found a way to escape. He faced larger ships and stronger armies, but he always fought with heart. He defended Washington when others ran, and though wounded and defeated, he left the battlefield with his honor intact. In truth, Joshua Barney was more than just a sailor. He was a symbol of determination, a leader who inspired his men, and a fighter who never gave up on the dream of American freedom. Conclusion. The story of Joshua Barney is a story of courage, sacrifice, and patriotism. From a restless boy in Baltimore to a seasoned commander at Bladensburg, his life was shaped by the sea, by battle, and by love for his country. Though the flames of Washington once lit up the sky, Barney's bravery lit up the hearts of his fellow Americans. His name may not be as famous as other heroes, but his legacy is written in the history of the United States. Joshua Barney, America's forgotten naval hero, deserves to be remembered, not only for the battles he fought, but for the unshakable spirit he carried to the very end.